Hello, I'm Sarah Russell, former producer of the ADHD Skills Lab. I'm thrilled to introduce my latest project, the Neurodivergent Report, an educational podcast dedicated to empowering neurodivergent individuals with accessible scientific knowledge and amplifying their exuberant stories. In each episode, we'll explore topics like the genetics and heritability of neurodiversity, alongside practical strategies for managing executive dysfunction and emotional dysregulation. Together, we can learn to heal in community. However, you are able to engage, thank you for being here. Hello, and welcome to the Neurodivergent Report, your new favorite research podcast for and by neurodivergent brains, bringing you research and exuberant personalities. I'm your host, Sarah Russell, sometimes known as a hysterical woman.
And I am JQ Walker, also known as her co-conspirator. And we are so glad that you're here.
So glad.
Woo!
And since today is our first research episode, I want to take the time and make sure that all of you can get to know Jay.
Thanks, Sarah.
How do I know you?
So, we worked together. How many was that? Like 2 years ago, I guess.
Yes, it was probably the end of summer, 2022. Was it right when I was having my baby?
I think it was after because you have two kids.
I do.
So it was
So maybe
after.
we're talking 2023 then. Yeah.
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 So I have a background in psychology research. So around that time, I was working at University of Virginia. I was going to get my PhD in clinical psychology, but then I had the onset of a few conditions that are actually comorbid, typically with ADHD and autism. But then I was also at the same time not sure if I wanted to even get my PhD. So I left and I started.
Relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. So I left and I started freelancing. And I was like writing for Psychology Today. I was already doing social anxiety coaching with this other company. And I found um, an ADHD coaching organization. And the person who was recruiting was none other than Miss Sarah Russell over here.
Whoop!
And
Yes.
and I was like so excited. And as
We
soon as
clicked.
we clicked. And it was always like so easy to talk to you. And I feel like we're going on a bunch of side tangents, as we
As
do.
we do. Yeah.
Um, yeah. And you were my like, I forgot like what the title would be. Like you were my like, that's, I don't
I
know,
think
superior. Like,
officially I was the trainer, supervisor, but it
yeah.
was really like a mentor role is how I
Yeah.
saw it at the time.
Yeah. And you were like the shining light at my time there. And like the clients were really great too.
Crying.
I know. But yeah, it was great. And now that I got to meet you, we're doing this.
Yes, and now we get to do this
Yes.
together and we get
Yeah.
to like reintroduce ourselves to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yes.
So, okay. Us neurodivergent brains contain multitudes. So tell me about yours.
Yes.
What else do you do? So you've already talked to us about you write, you've done social anxiety coaching.
Yes. Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, we'll just get into it.
Yeah.
Basically a lot of different things because it's kind of just if something's interesting, I'm like, I just want to go do this thing. So, yeah, the coaching, the writing. I've also done some market research stuff because with those research skills, I've done some of
What
that.
is market research?
So it is any time that someone's trying to understand who they're selling things to, they
Like a
could use market
product.
research. Yeah, like a
Uh,
product or a service. I've done like healthcare stuff. I've done stuff with like higher education organizations, like trying to figure out how do we recruit more students
mm,
or how do we make students
that's
feel like they're
amazing.
learning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
like a form of social research. Totally, I'm
exactly.
all about it.
Yeah, so I've done some of that, and then the thing that I'm also like probably as passionate about as I am with like mental health research and coaching would be voiceover work, which is why I have this fancy mic and I'm in this booth. Yeah, so JQ Walker, that is my stage name for voiceover stuff, but I'm also in a band, so it's also for my music stuff. Um, but yeah.
Band. Okay, so I know what kind of music you play, but
Yeah.
maybe everybody else might want to know.
Yeah. So like kind of I'd say like alternative rock. Well, we do covers and originals. Our originals have been more definitely alternative rock, but also leading kind of into like bluesy and like a little bit ska like it
Ooh.
sometimes. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, so it's been a blast. And like the four other people who are in this band with me, like we're all just like such good friends. So it's always a fun time just to get together and play. So
I love
yeah.
it. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just listening to some blues this morning with like the sunshine and the birds in the background and the wind is like, it's spring almost.
Yes, we're so
Um,
close.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, is there anything else, like, you wanna share about yourself? I know that I'm new and I'm saying
Oh,
things, but
that's true. I mean, I guess that's funny because, yeah, I mean, it's kind of the first episode, so nobody really knows me either.
yeah,
Maybe.
maybe.
Interesting. So, yeah, I'm Sarah Russell. Chronically ill. I'm neurodivergent, definitely diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety and
Out.
other sort of comorbidities. Yeah, like those medical conditions really can trigger a lot of mental health symptoms. But then they like the doctors will blame you for your mental health symptoms and then never help you treat your physicals.
And
Like,
if you
so
have
it just sort of
anxiety,
reinforces that.
it's just, like, automatic, like, "Oh, like, are you sure it's not just anxiety?" Like
Exactly. Like, and like so many different ways that anxiety manifests and
yeah.
it's all physical. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh no, that must be a mental health concern. So,
Right. Right.
anyway, I sort of had a really long journey of self teaching about sort of the body and its systems and autoimmune conditions in particular. Um, I sort of was diagnosed with PTSD first. And so that was my entrance into the neurodivergence research. And I've just been like voracious for it ever since. I want to
As many
help
are.
people. I'm really good at putting things into layman's terms, sort of like
She is.
for the common man, like
Yeah.
information for the people.
Accessibility for the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Like, what's the point of having this information if the people who need it can't access it? So that's why we're here. And I hope you freaking enjoy.
Yeah, like, that's exactly, like, one of the reasons why I was like, "Ooh, I don't really even know if I wanna do straight up, like, just academic research," is that I was learning all this information. I'm like, "I feel like people need to know this," and so many papers are just hidden behind paywalls or just in
Mm,
formats and using language that's just not,
yes.
accessible to everybody. Um,
Yes.
so I 100% resonate with that.
And
Yeah.
then, the research gets funded that, it's sort of the information that we have is sort of selected and
Yeah.
you know, in interests not necessarily of us neurodivergent
Yeah.
individuals.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that's why like it's really important to have those of us who understand the information and sort of have built up skills over time. I mean, I had a long career in like working with kids and really just I mean since they told me that it was my anxiety my whole life I basically was like okay well I guess I'm not coping hard enough so I must cope harder so like I learned all the things
Yeah.
um more that's getting reeled
Yeah, I
um
know. Oh my god. Yeah.
yeah that's really why we're here and
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you're listening right now. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. But yeah, basically, what we're going to do for the rest of the episode is more of the recurring bit. We're going to go through some research papers that I've selected. I think both of them are relatively new. Uh, and then we're just going to sort of take that information, spit it back to you, and then tell you why you should care.
Yeah.
That sound
That
good?
sounds good to me. Yeah.
So, okay. Um, Also, both of these papers are ADHD specific because I used to work on an ADHD specific podcast. Um, However, I firmly believe that they're widely generalizable. Like you can sort of take these papers and go, oh, yeah, that works for other neurodivergents. They are focused on, like, they were done strictly on ADHD children. However, the underlying theory that it talks about, the attention restoration theory, is broadly generalizable to other neurotypes. So, other types of neurodivergence, this has been studied on other types of neurodivergence. It's just so happens that these papers are about ADHD children. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so, who wants to introduce the first study?
Wait, really quick. What are
Yeah.
Prisma guidelines?
Great question. We should define that again.
Wanna because I don't know what that is, and I don't wanna just be like, they use Prisma guidelines. Don't know what that is.
Yeah. So yeah, it is just a basic reporting guidelines. So it's like the instruction manual for doing a like systematic review. Like it's like best practices.
That's really interesting because I've done like a handful of systematic reviews, including one at Brown, not to like name drop also slash like diss Brown, but like we have never talked about that ever.
Stop it. I super appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, the
Okay. So best
sometimes
practices.
sometimes we will, but that's great because sometimes I will just say things that is like nobody else knows what that is.
Back it up for a sec. Yeah.
Yeah, that that
Yeah.
is niche knowledge.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Okay,
the
cool.
first paper that we're going to talk about today is called "Could Nature Contribute to the Management of ADHD in Children? A Systematic Review." This paper was published in 2024 by the International Journal of Envi- Environmental Res Public Health. Um,
Resource? Resource?
you know what? I bless their heart. It's good
We'll
enough.
just go with res. Yeah.
Anyway, so it was published almost a year ago. And what they really were looking at is they wanted to synthesize and bring together all of the information on the benefits of nature exposure, like being outside, for individuals with ADHD. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. So they did that by having a systematic review that followed Prisma guidelines. So these are guidelines, just, best practices for literature reviews.
Figure one in this paper is the flowchart for how they selected their studies.
Okay.
So yeah, anybody, this paper was open source. So anybody who sort of wants to look at what is Prisma guidelines and how do papers get selected for systematic reviews? Why do you start out with 996 papers and then you end up only looking at seven?
Well, I could
You
actually,
can find out.
I could add a little bit of color to that because,
Talk about it. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess I'm just gonna really quick just be like a systematic review is when you take a bunch of the literature that's already out there and then you synthesize it all. And usually with systematic reviews, yeah, you don't want to be going through 996 studies that could all kind of be relevant. So usually you use some kind of software that scans the available literature and it spits back out. Studies that would be relevant to you. Then you and your team have an exclusionary criteria list and an inclusionary criteria list where you go through and you make sure to save all the ones that should be included and then exclude any of the ones that don't make sense. From there, you go through and you want to just make 100% sure that it's talking about the demographics that you wanted to talk about, that it's addressing the specific symptoms, stuff like that. So over time,
Hmm.
and then also how recent it is. So over time, it's very easy to narrow it down to just a few. Yeah. So they had 996 and got down to 7. So they were doing a lot of
Oh,
work.
yeah. I mean, I thought that was a bad thing, but um,
It's usually a good sense of cuz really quick, like another step that tends to happen is two people on the team will go through and pick out the most important information, and then they'll compare it with the other person's. And if they both are able to pick out the same information, that also says that the study is well written and understandable. I mean, granted, you would hope that anything
Amazing.
that's published would be that, but you never
You
know.
never know for
So
sure. Yeah,
yeah,
I actually remember reading specifically in there, it said that there
yeah,
were no disagreements between the
exactly.
authors.
Yeah,
And I was like, oh, well, that's great. Like, good for them.
good for
A for
them. Yeah,
communication.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, so some of that inclusion criteria here was like they were looking at children with ADHD. They were looking at studies that included some type of exposure to nature. Um, what is
What is
exposure
that?
to nature? Sort of just like being in the forest, being in the park, having access to a green space, like gardens, whether you're physically there or you can see it. That's sort of how they were measuring exposure to nature.
Do you know if
And
when they
then,
say park,
yeah.
they mean like a national park or a state park, something where you're walking through trails, or even something like a like a central park like equivalent where there's kind of some green spaces and some they might not specify.
I think they do go into that actually. Just looking, research reading.
Just another day. I feel like do research reading is just an accurate summary of like a good chunk of my life the past like 4 or 5 years.
I feel like I should turn that into an audio clip.
Yes.
And
Oh my god, it'll go viral on TikTok for all like the
for all the
like
reasons.
yeah.
But yeah. So, okay, so yeah, they do sort of talk about the specific effects of nature on ADHD, but now I feel like we're jumping ahead to the results. So I just want to make sure that we talked about all of the methods first. But that's a really great question.
Okay. Sorry.
Yes, they do.
As
No,
yeah, as it'll happen, we'll probably be bouncing around a little bit, but we'll try to stay on track as much as we can. So,
totally. That's
um,
yeah, that's like curiosity for you.
yeah.
um Okay, cool. So all of these people were diagnosed formally, which means sort of by a doctor, I
Mhm.
guess, in this case,
Yeah.
which is good. They included studies that measured exposure to nature objectively and subjectively. So they basically would put a tracker on people and see, I don't know, like the metrics, like did it improve their heart rate?
Things
How
you can
long were they actually
tangibly
out there?
measure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
objective things,
Yeah.
sure. And then the subjective measures were more like symptom questionnaires, which tend to be less reliable, but not always. I think it depends on how the questions are written.
Yeah, I think it's like objective measures can provide yeah, kind of more it's observable, but it doesn't really go that deep. Where subjective
Hmm.
measures, they're not always super reliable, especially if it's self-reporting, but it's the kind of thing where you get a lot more depth and like just a lot more detail into what exactly is going on.
The lived experience.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, the last thing I want to say about this paper is that I was really thrown off by this. I learned a new phrase today. So
Cool.
I'm just going to read, read a little quote. It says, a meta analysis was not possible due to the heterogeneity in methodological approaches and the diverse nature of the outcome measures used. Therefore, a descriptive synthesis was used. And
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Excuse
um,
me.
yeah, what does that mean? So basically, a meta analysis is like the cream of the crop. When you go looking for research, if you can find a meta analysis about that topic, then you can really, like, generally speaking, you can really trust that information. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do one of those in this case because the current research out there is
Like they used a lot
not
of different
samesies enough. Like,
yes,
yeah,
not samesies enough.
yeah, they're using too many different variables. They're not measuring things the same way each time. It's the I always complain about research. Like stress is defined
Oh
differently
my
in different
god.
papers,
Yeah.
and that really grinds my gears. And that's
Yeah.
why we can't have a meta analysis about about it. That's why we can't have nice things, y'all.
That's why we can't have nice things. And it's messed up because it's like I understand having different approaches and sometimes like you need to do things differently, but as
Yeah.
far as like shared definitions, I feel like that's so important. I feel like shared
Yeah.
definitions are so important. But
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Especially with things like stress because
yeah.
I believe that stress is super detrimental to our physical health.
Yes.
Like, yeah, we talk about it as a mental health concern, but really it's like it's toxic to your
The
body.
body connection, man. Like
Yeah, we need more research on that.
um,
Awesome. So now we can dig into the results of this paper because
yes.
yeah, we definitely want to talk about things like what is a natural setting that counts and what are symptoms that are reduced and things like that.
Okay.
So Jay, do you want to tell me sort of try to sum up the results of this paper?
I got you. Got some notes written down though. So,
Amazing.
what did they find? They found that generally nature had a favorable effect on ADHD symptoms. Woo. Uh,
Surprise.
yeah. Imagine if it was the opposite. Um, so, studies that used satellite imaging reported that higher vegetation density was associated with lower instances of ADHD symptoms. So, that was one finding. They also classified, as a side note, natural settings to be big trees and grass or an urban park. And they found that children exposed to those settings had less severe ADHD symptoms and better concentration. Which wouldn't that,
Wow.
yeah, wouldn't that be, would better, how do you think that better concentration is different than less severe ADHD symptoms? Or, yeah, I guess.
I think it's just one dimension, like a one example of what a
Oh, it's
lessened
found.
symptom would be in this case. Yeah.
Okay.
Cuz okay, so like the discussion section of this paper talks about how dopaminergic and nope. The dopamine and the noradrenaline systems are crucial for attention and behavioral control. Um, and sort of nature, exposure to nature can influence these systems, quote unquote, by providing a serene environment that reduces stress and cortisol levels, having the ability to positively affect the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in executive functions.
Mhm.
It's just more coping. It's not the only coping.
Let's get that straight.
Yeah.
But
But I
yeah.
saw a lot of people outside today and they were all smiling.
So, I mean, answer's right in front of you. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man.
Amazing. What else do we need to talk about with this paper? I feel
Um,
like that's like the biggest one though.
that's the biggest chunk. I mean, as a
Yeah,
side thing that, they were just making sure that any confounding variables were taken under consideration, so things like sex and
totally.
gender, age, and annual household income. So all those were analyzed, and they did not, find a significant impact with those variables on the effect of nature on ADHD.
Yeah, I mean basically what that means is that like no matter who you are going to benefit from being outside.
Yeah, yeah.
If you struggle with stress.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, and they also talk about different types of settings, like natural settings and like built urban parks they talk
yeah.
about a little bit here. Um, so obviously there's, different types of outdoor settings and where you live is going to impact your ability to access nature. Let's talk about the limitations of this paper because I just want to see what the authors state as the limitations first.
Gotcha.
Where
Then
are
verse.
they? Here it is. So one of the criticisms of this paper is that it only looks at like the greenness of the satellite. The satellite studies were looking at
The density?
greenness. Yeah,
Yeah,
and but greenery isn't the only type of nature. They say so.
that's
Water
true.
wouldn't be accounted for. Yeah, any kind of animals really. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe even, like, being in, like, the mountains. Like, I know there's trees on mountains, but sometimes, um,
Hmm.
there could be a lot of elevation, and you could be, like, being able to see a lot, but it's just more rocky.
And then they say, how are you going to quantify your exposure to nature? Because, like, some people live in nature and some people have to go on vacation to nature. Um, and so, is it just
Right.
as important for all of those people? Yes. But your nature is going to be different. Because is it nature
Mhm.
or is it my
Mhm.
backyard? Is it special or is it mundane?
Yeah, exactly. Like if it's your
Yeah.
backyard, do you need a different version of nature?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are great questions that unfortunately are
Yeah.
not answered here, but
Yeah.
the the implications for future research section of this paper was long.
Yeah.
And it's mostly calling for like make like terms.
Mm.
Find common denominators.
Mhm. Please.
Stop trying to play me with all these definitions.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I feel like I had a handful of questions, like, after taking all this in. I'm also wondering about, like, how long the symptoms are reduced for,
Totally. That
you
was
know?
another limitation. One of
Yeah.
the calls for this paper is that they need to be able to measure the longevity of these effects.
Right.
There were no longitudinal studies done here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what would we do here? So we would I mean, if I was thinking about how to design a study that would measure a longitudinal design, it would
Yeah.
be on camp kids
Yeah.
and it
That's a
would
good
be every
idea.
year.
Yeah,
Yep.
that makes sense.
Actually, I know a camp that
Mhm.
takes urban kids and brings them to
Oh,
rural New York
nice.
every year. Shout out to
Yeah.
Maury's camp.
Yeah.
Um,
Shout
maybe we
out.
should get some social research
Yeah.
going. Um,
Yeah.
anyway,
Um,
wow, that's interesting. Okay. Another thing is that they didn't really talk about medication status at all, which
interesting. Yeah. A
eh,
factor that would impact what's going on for sure.
definitely it's like it would be a variable that could definitely affect how you're feeling about life, especially if you like went through a med change just at the same time.
Yeah.
um hmm
Similarly, I don't know if it was one of the other confounding variables, but something like comorbidities. I don't know if that
no,
was. Yeah.
no, I think they were really out there fighting for their life with this paper and they did a fantastic job.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But it's like it's a
um
great like foundation and start to then have
yeah.
all these questions come up and now have a lot more advancement in this area. Like
hmm
so
Yeah, I love that they were able to pull out all of the papers that are talking about this,
yeah.
nature and the art, the attention restoration theory. Do you want to introduce this one?
Sure. So, this next study was published in Visions of Sustainability in 2020. It's called Contact with Nature Can Help ADHD Children to Cope with Their Symptoms: The State of the Evidence and Future Directions for Research. So, the objective, this was a mini review, which
Mm,
I've also never heard of before.
it's
You,
mini.
it's just small version of, I guess, a liter
they
or a
they
systematic review.
again didn't have a lot to work with, I think.
Gotcha. So these papers seem like they're laying the groundwork, hopefully, for some more
Yeah,
research in this
exactly.
field. Um, yeah, so they were trying to provide an overview of existing restorative research on children with ADHD. Um,
Mhm,
of course, suggest new directions for future research since it seems limited, and offer proposals for policymakers, parents, and teachers regarding how to implement nature based
mhm.
interventions for folks with ADHD.
Yeah, that is a much needed study.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna look up exactly what is a mini review. Yeah, it just says a concise summary of a specific research topic.
Hmm.
So it's clearly not a systematic review. It doesn't even go so far as to call itself a literature review.
Hmm.
So this is probably, it's sort of just like, oh, we're gonna do a paper and we're gonna find some research on it, you
It's gonna be great.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
We're gonna have
do
a good
it.
time. Yeah. Yeah.
So they they're really looking for evidence that exposure to nature can offer you some benefits. And again, I'm going to say this theory name again because I've never heard it before, but attention restoration theory. And it basically just means that mental fatigue and concentration can be improved by your time spent in or looking at nature.
Mhm.
Um, the capacity of the brain to focus on a specific stimulus or task is limited and results in directed attention fatigue. So, this is another, yeah, again, this is another review. So, the methodology section of this paper is like we looked at
We
research.
looked at papers.
Um, yeah,
And 4 gaps to fill in literature. I feel like there's more than 4 gaps to fill, guys, but,
for sure. But
uh,
this
they're
is what they
focusing on
found.
4.
Oh, I love that they came up with some of the same things though.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, yeah. Different natural scenarios. What else we got? The difference between nearby or everyday and extraordinary nature.
That's what I was just talking
I
about.
know.
What's extraordinary nature?
Yeah. Wait, was that rhetorical or an actual question? Sorry.
So it's funny. It was an actual question, but like no, it's amazing. So it says it's worth examining whether extraordinary nature is awe evoking.
Mm.
And as
Oh,
such, what is the relation with symptom alleviation? So, like, extraordinary nature is out literally, I don't know if you know this, but extraordinary just means outside of the ordinary.
ordinary. Yeah.
It doesn't even mean good.
Yeah. It's
Like,
just different.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, it's what I was talking about before. It's like if you live in nature, your backyard is not going to really do
Really
the same
wow yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not as much bang for your buck.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, you mentioned the phrase awe-evoking, and I'm wondering if that would just come about just from just it being different or from having it be some kind of nature where, like, the average person would agree, like, "This is, like, amazing to look at." Like, I feel like if you don't see like, let's pretend you live in Alaska, and then there's part of the year where you don't see, like, the sun very often, where if you were to see a sunset, is that amazing because most people agree that sunsets are really beautiful to watch and, like, they take over the whole sky, like, it has a huge impact, or is it because you haven't seen it in a while, or both? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. That's definitely something to ponder.
yeah.
I definitely just wanted to share that I am such a take a photo of that sunrise sunset
Oh,
person.
yeah. Yeah.
I have,
Yeah.
like, a million gold my Google Photos has added them all to an album called The Golden Hour, and I love that for me. Yeah, so, like, sometimes it's a really lot like, sometimes it'll be months before I see a really beautiful sunrise or
Yeah.
sunset, sometimes they're just not awe-inspiring.
Invoking or
Yeah,
evoking? I don't know.
I think both would work.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah, because like, I invoke the wrath of
Invoke, yeah.
the golden hour.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Moving on.
Jumping back.
Yeah, so having those photos of the, awe-inspiring nature for me really can serve the like, it's like a little I don't know, what I would call, like, a dopa boost, but really,
Yeah,
I'm sure it
yeah,
just gives me joy. I think if we make it really basic, like this thing makes me happy and it
yeah.
sends neurotransmitters to my brain and then maybe if I'm lucky, my body is also connected and so I get like
Yes.
nice feelings
Little
in my body
tingles.
too.
Yeah.
Um yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, just to bring it all home.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, but this paper talks a lot about if we want to jump back to our notes, this
mhm,
paper talks a lot about specific um like results,
mhm. Yeah, so one of them would
like
be
being yeah.
oh, sorry,
Exactly.
wasn't
Exactly, like
sure.
what I was just saying.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Go.
green views from apartment windows could potentially reduce symptoms, suggesting that green views are a protective factor for children in urban areas. That's what you were trying to get at before, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Totally. Yeah,
Um,
and yeah, I just think it's so important for kids to have a window in their room.
Yeah.
But it can also be tough depending on how sort of what environment you live in. Um,
Mhm.
not everybody even lives in a place that has access to like an outside window, I think.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if that's like a privileged sort of expectation.
Or even to go one step further with that, like a window that lets you see not even just green space, but then some kind of nature in general.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder because it does talk a little bit about urban areas. Um, in these notes, I didn't,
It's all good.
but it really does seem like the more secluded, the more woodsy um, areas are considered to be more restorative. So, like it seems like the denser the wood, um, the
Mhm.
more restorative the exposure.
That specifically is so interesting to me, and I wonder, like, what their definition of restorative is.
I was thinking like if I'm gonna go spend a day in the state forest, I'm gonna need to like really prepare for that. And it's not
Yeah.
something where I could just drop by the park and stroll around for 15 minutes. Like that's a
Right.
whole trip. So I wonder if also like just the length of time being longer
Right.
also just naturally makes it better.
It's interesting. I don't see them defining restorative. I'm assuming that they think it's just the basic definition. So just having the ability to restore health, strength, or feeling of well-being.
Oh yeah. Yeah, of course. Because ultimately they were looking at impulsivity and inattentive sort of behaviors.
Yes.
I mean whenever you give an ADHD or a questionnaire, those are the two main symptom areas that they're
Right.
looking at, like how is your impulsivity and how's your inattention.
Right.
um I don't know about you, but I'm combined, so I have those both
Same.
wonderful symptoms. Yeah,
Yup. Yup.
it's
uh
hysterical.
it's never a dull moment, man, you know? Never a dull moment. But so this whole thing with the woods being perceived as restorative in reference to attention restoration theory, this kind of had me going like this. I mentioned this to you earlier, via I think a comment that I left, but like it had me thinking down this whole line of why why is nature restorative? Like I know that this is looking at um
Yes.
how it is, but I'm like, well, what is it about it? Like I think that any person knows just like intuitively or just, like, things that have been told to us for a while, like, it's good to be outside, it's good
I
to be
was
one.
thinking the same thing when I was out for my
Yeah,
walk. I was like, why is
yeah,
everybody out here enjoying this right now? Like last week we were all
yeah,
grumpy at the
I
grocery store.
know. And, like, I mean, I feel like right now you could argue, "Oh, it's novel and it's new because we've been inside for the winter." But
Uh-huh.
even, but people go outside all the time in the summer and still love doing it. So I think that there's this level of just humans, their natural environment, like we were meant to be in nature, kind like that idea. I feel
Yeah.
like is some of it, but I'm wondering specifically well, actually, specifically for neurodivergent people, but even people who aren't, just is it like the visual stimulation? Is it the sensory, other senses like auditory or like things that you smell or things that you touch? Um, or is it this idea where going outside or going into nature is an escape from maybe it's an escape from the work that you're doing or an escape from just being in a certain environment, but just in general, an escape from societal norms kind of thing. And I don't know how
How
deep that goes.
psychosocial of you.
But
Yes.
yeah. But yeah, like just needing a break from like societal constraints. And then even just the idea of like moving around is good for you
Yeah.
and makes you feel good. So
Totally.
yeah.
They find the very similar benefits from similar durations of just movement, like
Mm-hmm.
jumping on a trampoline or going
Yeah.
for a walk.
Yeah.
Jump rope sometimes is what they like common studies.
It sounds like some kind of just cardio at all.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
I suspect that we'll continue to think about this for the next
yeah,
like 6 months because we're
yeah,
just about to have our outdoor season.
yes.
Which
It'll
is
be on
why
the mind.
this topic is super timely. And I
Yes.
just wanted to encourage everybody to spend time outside. Um, yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
I really hope that they get their act together and start researching this in a more rigid way
Yeah.
so that people can take it seriously.
Yeah.
Because this is one of those topics that people are like, ah,
Oh, ADHD in nature, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
yeah, like, ah, my gut.
Yeah.
Nobody wants
Yeah.
to read about stress.
Yeah.
It's like we all know it's there, but it's the elephant in the room. Um,
I got you.
yeah. So, yeah. So it would be great if we could get a little bit more of this because then we could really
Yeah.
combine it with um other types of support, like maybe you bring somebody with you,
Yes.
you make it a communal sort
Yes.
of
Oh my gosh, something that
benefit.
I would do even during the winter because I live in upstate New York, so it be snowing. So it be snowing, but like, get on your boots, bundle up, and then get some of your friends, be like, we're gonna go on a group hike. A good time. So yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I I think it's all of those things.
Yeah.
But I'll let them tell us for sure.
Yes.
Anyway, this has been amazing. I wonder how are we going to end this?
Hmm. The idea of virtual extraordinary nature is interesting. Um, it's an interesting implication for future research, but
Yeah. It's like me with my sunset photos.
yes. Or I would imagine it has some effect, but I would venture a guess it's not the same amount.
No,
Like the
I bet it's not.
yeah.
Probably doesn't pack as big of a punch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think that a lot of us neurodivergents have gotten away from the concept of play.
mm,
And so going outside to nature feels like self-indulgent and
yeah.
like not not a thing we should be wasting our time on.
Right.
I think that's just capitalism has brainwashed you, my friend, and I
Yeah.
welcome you outside to play. Come
Yes.
outside and play with me.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I don't know if you want to see us. We're gonna be sort of on Instagram. We're gonna be on YouTube. If you want to share with us,
Yeah.
you being outside, feel free
Yes.
to
We
do
would love
that.
that.
Connect with us.
Yeah. We're friendly.
Goofy is
Goofy.
yeah, is the vibe.
Sure.
Yeah, come be goofy with us.
I'll be goofy. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This
This
is
has been wonderful.
I
We're going to do
know.
more episodes.
Yes. So be ready.
Get ready. We're
Get
coming.
ready. We're on our way.
We're already here.
We've arrived. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Well, we will see you next time.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for being here. If you want to connect with the Neurodivergent Report, you can find us at ND Report Pod on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and YouTube. If you're looking to support the show, the best thing you can do is to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Please. You can check out ndreportpod.com for more information, or if you want to be a guest contributor. Until next time, be well, do good.